And also, well, I might as well talk about it now. That my copy of the NZI
Yeah.
Improving Road Safety Through Technology report. This was the 2021, wasn't it? This report came out. Yeah.
Yes.
Both Charles and I contributed to this. It's got some very interesting statistics in it that we'll talk about today. You can get a copy of that online on the NZI website if anyone's interested.
Yeah, no, it's been good. We're starting to pull some data together around what we're seeing from a Guardian point. We've put a database together, and it is starting to show some initial, well, prove some of the things that we kind of had thought, and disprove a lot of things that people in general think around fatigue and so forth, and kind of what's going on out there in the world.
That will be fascinating. We're in the process of pulling together our annual traction report, and one of the sections is around people's attitude to fatigue and stress. So
yes,
interesting to kind of look if there was some correlation between that data.
Yeah, well, we're sort of pulling together insights around, what's the peak fatigue time, I guess, during the day and so forth, and also depending on start times and so forth, what when people kind of have most fatigue events, and it's definitely proving out that kind of first hour, 2 hours of shift seems to be the worst, which I guess is really pointing us back to the fact that people are often starting work having not been well rested and so forth, and that of course ties back to that document you had before, Kelly, which had the numbers around the highest claim times and so forth, which were at 1 to 2 hours of into the shift is where they see most of the crashes happening as well.
Yeah, for sure. Right, well, we'll just crack on and get started. Welcome to those that have come along today to our monthly webinar. The topic for today, as you'll be aware, is winning over the skeptic, some strategies for addressing employee concerns about camera adoption. We are joined today by a special guest, Charles Dawson from AutoSense. Charles and I are part of the FleetFit partnership and have worked together for quite a number of years. And we've got lots of good examples that we can draw on today, about what good practice looks like in this space. So Guardian in New Zealand around the world is a specialist fatigue and distraction system. It's got hundreds of thousands of cameras around the world, out in heavy vehicles and light vehicles, I believe. Charles, what does that kind of look like for New Zealand?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kelly. And I did chuckle a little bit when you talk about skeptics involved in transport industry. So I'm sure there's one or two that we've all met in our times. So yeah, Guardian in terms of deployment in New Zealand, we've just ticked over 5,000 units deployed now. And I guess in the bigger picture, as far as Guardian kind of worldwide goes, I think there's just over 50,000 units now installed or deployed around the world. There's a big chunk of those come out under Caterpillar, who look after a lot of the mining sector and so forth. But the remainder would be in transport and more we're finding in light vehicles and so forth.
And one of the reasons I invited Charles along today is that Guardian is one of the, it's very widely used in the transport and logistics sector, both in New Zealand and Australia where we work. So that gives Charles more exposure to many other people to what it takes to implement a camera system, but also what some of the concerns might be, and some of the examples that we've both seen of where it's actually been done really well. Charles, in my experience, Guardian as a camera system tends to get quite, if it's not done well, quite a bit of resistance. There tends to be a few skeptics. And what are some of the common reasons that you think that happens?
Look, I think maybe if even you go back to the very heart of the matter, as so often people, there's a great stat around that says that 80% of people think they're a better driver than the guy sitting next to them. So if you kick off in the, I guess, the point that me myself, I'm very, very good, and I don't need any help, but you'll just about always find that everyone will think that everyone else should have these systems in their vehicle because they all definitely need help. And I think, when you are starting with a position that you don't feel like you need any help in something, it's a bit like telling someone who's got some issues or whatever, that they need to go to the doctor, or they need to seek some help in that area. So,
or asking your mum to go and get seen for a hearing aid.
yeah, absolutely, and it's exactly the same thing. We're not very good at understanding that that we do need some assistance. So.
And one of the unique things about the Guardian system is, yes, it's a camera system, but its primary purpose is around managing fatigue and distraction, correct?
Yeah, correct. I guess we talk a lot about intervention. So Guardian is all about identifying someone becoming impaired in some fashion, whether it's through being tired or being sleepy, or that they're impaired because they're distracted by a mobile device or anything else that's happening in the cabin. And I guess the really key factor is the intervention piece, where we don't just want to sit there and watch what happens next. We actually want to get the driver concentrating back on the road. And I think, that's the other component to one of the reasons why I guess intervention type systems possibly get more pushback than a conventional camera, or sort of a dumb camera that's just sort of sitting there recording things, is that it is buzzing and squeaking and all the rest of it. So it kind of reminds the driver that camera is actually in the cab, really annoying them. So
that it exists. Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, because there are a lot of different types of camera systems deployed, particularly in heavy transport. You've got the systems who are looking for blind spot monitoring. You've got forward-facing cameras. But the unique thing about Guardian is that driver-facing camera. It's looking into the cab, monitoring the driver's driving behavior. And I guess that's where it becomes very personal. And it's some of the common concerns that I've heard are it's impinging on my privacy. I don't need someone to be watching me scratch my nose or singing a song. Drivers sometimes say they don't like to be monitored all the time, and that they feel that can increase their stress, or that just having a monitoring system can create a distraction for them in the cab. I find those resistance points quite hard myself, because I guess it comes back to the purpose of why is that there. I thought we could just do a quick Q&A on some of those things, because between us, I am aware of how the Guardian system works, but just for those on the call. So the first one that we hear sometimes is, does Guardian record audio?
Yeah, no. So Guardian doesn't, and I actually often get asked, whether we can make it record audio, because companies and drivers want to be able to shout out registration numbers of drivers that have cut them off, all that sort of thing. But we have no, there is no microphone on the system whatsoever. And in actual fact, there is I guess when you look at privacy laws around utilization of monitoring and surveillance equipment, there was a landmark decision by the courts, probably, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, whereby in actual fact the judge did find that using visual monitoring was okay if it was being used from a safety point of view, but audible went a step too far, recording people's personal conversations and things. So no, Guardian does not record audio.
And another common one is, can my manager log in and watch me? Can they log into the system and monitor
Live
at any time?
No. Unlike probably Mr. Google on your phone or Apple, we can't do that. So interestingly, with Guardian, I mean, one of the things that's I guess good from a privacy point of view with Guardian is that the only footage that actually goes through the cloud is in fact event footage. So one of the parameters of what we call an event, whether it be 1.5 seconds worth of eye closure or 4 seconds looking away from the road, has to have occurred prior to any event footage being sent through to the cloud for us to look at.
Mm. Yeah, and I think the heart of what you're saying there is this is a safety system. The footage is only captured and transmitted back when it's triggered by a safety event. You know, when there is that impairment, as you said, whether that's fatigue or distraction.
Yes, yes.
One of the other common responses managers tend to give when I'm involved in these conversations with drivers is to laugh and say, "Do you think anyone's got enough time in their day
Yes.
to be able to log in and watch?"
Yeah.
Watch our drivers, don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's hard
And
enough for them to see the intervention
yeah.
footage.
Well, that's right, and then I think the other side of it is that we well, I don't think anyone particularly wants to actually log in and look at people. Someone doing a deep dive, picking their nose is really not. Well, I don't know about you, but it's not something that I particularly need to see or have ever seen. So
Yeah. And then the last kind of frequently asked question that I've heard is just the point about Guardian has lights on the system, some very faint infrared lights. And I have actually heard a driver say to me, the lights feel like laser beams shooting into my eyeball.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
Well, look, I mean, I guess the first part of our response is always to understand that this is people's health, and I can get that you're concerned that that your eyes might be damaged and that sort of thing. I guess the key point there is, and you need a little physics lesson here, but infrared is just part of the natural light spectrum. It's naturally occurring. As we sit here today, there is infrared light all around us, and the infrared lamps, as we call them, are emitting what infrared and what's called in the spectrum is called the safe zone, which is essentially that you can sit there and have it all day long, and it's some multiples less than what you get in the cab just on from the light around us coming in the windows. So,
yeah. So it's more dangerous to walk around outside with your eyes open than it is to look at the little lights on the Guardian system.
Yeah, that's right. And when you actually start to read the literature and so forth, anyone who doesn't wear sunglasses on a general daily basis out there is really running themselves some major concerns, because the UV and all that sort of thing is far worse.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I guess coming back to the topic here today about winning over the skeptics is these frequently asked questions are things that we hear from a lot of drivers because they've never received any training or information or education about how the camera system works.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I guess, core to the message that we're wanting to cover today is just when you're implementing a camera system like this, or whether it's Guardian or any other camera system, it's making sure that you've educated people or given them some training and awareness about what is the system, why is it there, and what's the benefits to it, what's the upside to it. There was a terrifying stat in this report that I referenced before that said I think it's 72% of drivers have never had any training on the in-cab safety technology that they're driving around with. I mean, no one's ever told them what does lane departure warnings do, what does the camera system, how does the camera system work, etc. And I think that's a really big opportunity to engage your team and do the right thing.
Definitely, and I think, I mean, you talk about training on in-cab safety systems. I mean, how many drivers have had any regular training on how to actually drive? Which sure, it's a skill that we that we naturally learn as we're out there, and we learn through making mistakes, like all things. But there's not many industries now whereby you don't have some form of annual refresher training just to remind you that what you're doing is dangerous when you're out there. And it's being on the roads in any vehicle, whether or even on shanked painting, walking around is probably some of the most dangerous things that we do on any given day. So refresher training, just working with your people, working with your team is really important. Just taking that time to stop. One of the things that I think is really interesting in terms of where do you start with any of these things. I mean, if you look at Guardian as an example, is going back to the root kind of issue as to why we're putting a Guardian unit in a truck, and that's to say, well, is is fatigue an issue that we are concerned about in our vehicle? And kind of starting there and going, well, look, what are the different solutions that are available? And we certainly have, one of our clients who set up essentially a people's council that, and the premise they started with is, we know fatigue is an issue. We've had some issues around some crashes and issues with that. So fatigue is an issue. What are we going to do about it? And what are the correct solutions? So if you start with your people with here's a problem, now what are the solutions, then quite naturally you move to this being a potential solution or part of that program, and at least then people are actually starting to move down that path rather than just turning up one day and here's a beepy, buzzy, vibrating thing in my seat, which just annoys me.
And going, what is this and where did it come from?
Yeah.
One of the messages that I like to share with people, or soundbite that you can take away from this, is that fatigue is human, right? It happens to all of us. The fact that professional drivers spend that much more time on the road means that it is very naturally one of the highest risks to them and to others. So as such, as one of the critical risks in your business, you need to put in place not only prevention, but also protection measures. And that's why Guardian is so good, because it does actually intervene and wake you up, stop you driving off the road or into grandma or whatever it could be. I think that message tells about communicating the why is probably one of the first of my 3 top tips for today. It's just about the opportunity to use a structured change management approach, which is communicate why you're doing this. What is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And then getting people actually involved in the implementation. One of the examples that I had was a company that decided that this was a critical risk and they were going to put a Guardian camera system in. And rather than going out and being disingenuous and saying to people, well, what do you think we should do? They said, no, this is what we're going to do, but we need you to help us figure out what are the policies and procedures, how is this going to work? They got a couple of their people to do a trial and give them feedback, and that helped to sort of figure out how as a business they were going to implement the system. And I think change that's done with us as opposed to change that's done to us is probably the number one way to overcome some of that skepticism, because actually, hey, I was part of this solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think we talked about cynicism and people being cynical to start with, and I mean it is incredible. I've done a lot of drivers briefings when we've been introducing technology, or quite often we wait till the technology's been in there for a while and there's all sorts of issues with it. I'm still not quite clear on which is the best approach, whether you kick off at the beginning when no one's really interested because they're not there, or you get into it once the problem's there. But nowadays when I'm giving these drivers briefings, reasonably unapologetic that this is what the system's going to do, and it is going to be annoying at times and so forth. But the reality is that when you think about the reality of what can happen when a driver is asleep, and you mentioned before that it's kind of a sleep or fatigue is actually it's a health issue, as opposed to necessarily a compliance issue. Yes, there can be some compliance parts about it where people are working 2 jobs or whatever, but so often factors out of our control will cause us not to get a good night's sleep, and we're essentially having not had a good night's sleep. When we jump in and do something that requires us to be switched on, we're not really there. And so but there's always this issue that the world needs to go on. I mean, you just because you've had there's a new baby in the house and so forth, how many people, no matter what their job, don't get up in the morning and go to work? It's just not part of what it is. So we do need to have an engineering solution in place that's then also followed up by the people side as well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the best techniques I've seen that you can do all the best driver briefings, as you said, you can make the information available, you can make sure your depot managers understand how the tech works. but you'll always get your one or two very hardened skeptics.
Yes.
And one of the most powerful tools that I've seen to overcoming that is actually showing them some live footage
Yeah.
where they can actually see the system in play, whether that's their own footage,
Yes.
or if you can get someone in the team that will give permission that you can share.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the suggestions I've been working with lately is that even if you can't get permission to show live footage to everyone, they may give you permission just to show it to the one or two people who are resistant, who need to be, who need a little bit more evidence that the system is really going to work for them.
The exceptions. Yeah. And I mean, it is interesting. I mean, we've come across quite often had businesses where we're getting a whole lot of negative feedback that, there's all these false events and false alerts and so forth. And you sort of, when you actually get on a call with them, it turns out that the drivers are getting called. So the depot manager say, or the dispatcher's getting a call from the Guardian Centre saying, hey, your driver's fallen asleep. And for whatever reason, privacy, whatever, the dispatcher or the person who's going to give the driver a call hasn't actually got access to the footage. So when they ring the driver just goes, oh, no, look, it was sunstrike or this or that or the other. And so everyone sits there and goes, oh, useless, doesn't work. But actually when you then we get involved, we have a look, we go, well, no one's actually logged into the system. So no one's viewed this footage. And then, when you actually do show them the footage, the place goes into craziness and raptures, and everyone's got the fire hoses out trying to put the fire out. So that it's that, yes, privacy is very important, but that kind of chain of custody of the information, the people that are having those conversations do need to have the proper information in front of them. It's really key.
Yeah, and look, that was going to be my second top tip about the implementation of one of these systems, whether that's forward-facing cameras, blind spot monitoring, whatever type of camera system, is the operationalization of the system. So understanding how will that data be used, how will that footage be used, when will it be used, who has access to it. And then also, I guess the flip side of that is, what is the standard you'll walk past? So if you find a camera's being either obscured or misaligned, are you just going to go, oh yeah, no, that's fine, and do nothing? Are you monitoring it for a start? Are you doing something about it? Because I can tell you the fleets where the ops manager rings the driver 20 seconds after he's left the depot and said, mate, your camera's obscured. Can you clear that, please? That sends a very strong message to go, this is real, people care, it's actually being managed. And you nip that bad behavior in the bud right from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that we have a second camera system now that has AI and so forth attached to it, artificial intelligence detection of things that drivers are doing and all the rest of it. And one of the things I think that we all have to be really careful about it as we start on this journey is to really identify, what is the key thing we're trying to achieve here, because the amount of data these things and the amount of video clips that they can create is overwhelming. And, so you spend, I guess if there's 3 or 4 really key events that potentially could have had a crash or caused a crash, or and obviously someone asleep at the wheel is it's always one of those. You can deal with that 3 or 4 across a fleet of 20, 30, 40 trucks. When you've suddenly got 500 events from a day, and yes, lots of them will be concerning and distracting and so forth, but that amount of data, no one is ever going to be able to actually successfully get through and then do something about. So I think that's probably a really big key message is really work out once again why are you putting this system in, this engineering solution, and how many different factors can you actually as a business deal with and really kind of nail and get down to that pointy end on that.
That probably leads to one of the other examples I was going to give about a large national company in New Zealand who does do that, who looks at the data across the whole country, and their fleet manager is looking for the trends. So that's
Yes.
the trends and the types of events they're having, the trends and branches that need some attention, or drivers that need some attention because they're having a number of events. And with the national data, he's looking at, well, what training programs do I need to put in place? What is there a communication campaign about? Is smoking an issue? Is it seatbelts that's the issue? Et cetera, et cetera. One of the things about the alternate, I guess, positive messages about the camera systems, we talked before about fatigue is human, it's a critical risk to our industry, but it's actually driver-facing cameras is actually proven to improve driving behaviour as well, because when we're being observed, or when we potentially being observed, we tend to be more alert, pay more attention, etc., etc. And so from that distraction point of view, certainly most companies report that the installation of a camera system and then the operationalization of it sees an improvement in driving behavior across the board.
Yep.
And to be honest, this is so commonplace as safety equipment now in heavy transport.
Yeah.
We hear drivers say that they won't drive without it these days.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, sounds funny, but we obviously have Guardian systems in our vehicles, and when I go away and I have a rental car and I have to drive somewhere on any distance, you do kind of feel a bit naked without it, because when you see 100 people fall asleep a day, you're pretty aware that it can happen to you at any time. And it's interesting actually what you say there, Kelly. We obviously on another side of the business where we look after a lot of light vehicle fleets, we have a driver risk survey that each driver does, and funnily enough, we had a large firm of 500 odd drivers go through, and they just went through the questionnaire, the risk questionnaire, which is really just trying to understand the risk that company faces with their drivers. And the insurance company told us afterwards, the underwriter NZI told us afterwards, is that there was for the next 2 months, having simply done that part, there was a 20 to 30% premium, or a claims drop. And so you can only but say, and we hadn't told them anything, but you can only but say that people were thinking when they jumped into their vehicle that I need to drive this vehicle, not
steer it,
make some meetings, not have some phone calls. I've actually got to think about where I'm going and all of that sort of stuff. So I think as you say, having something in there that potentially is watching you is probably just making you that little bit more aware of doing the right thing.
And then the final thing that we haven't really touched on yet is the assurance piece, or that in terms of what's in it for the driver, it's the protection for the driver. I mean, yes, there's a fatigue element, but particularly forward-facing cameras where they can manually record the footage. A lot of drivers that I've spoken to love that, because they can create some evidence that where there's either an incident or a driver cuts them off or whatever it might be, they can say, look, I was alert, I was driving, I've recorded this footage, the other driver was at fault. And we actually published the National Truck Accident Research Centre report, which shows that most truck accidents, it is not the truck driver or the truck occupant at fault. So particularly where it's truck and vehicle. So look, we've run out of time. It always goes quickly. There's lots that Charles and I could talk about different approaches to doing this, but I just want to summarize kind of those top 3 tips that we talked to. The first one is using a change management approach to make sure that you actually manage the people side of implementing technology. I've seen too many companies that say, yep, we're going to roll out a camera system, IT is going to take the lead. Or people show up to work and the tech's in their truck and they go, what? So making sure that you manage the change, take the people on the journey, get them ready, willing and able to use it. It's really, really important. The second one is just keeping your focus on why are we doing this. We talked about the fact that fatigue is human. This is about being a professional driver. It's very commonplace. It's often a requirement for customer contracts. It's a piece of safety equipment. We want to get you home safe at the end of the day. Just really, really focusing on that why message. And then the third one is that operationalization. There's no point in putting a camera system in if you're not using the data, if you're team feel like you're ignoring problems and not actually providing support, for example, to people who are suffering fatigue. You know, it's really important that operationalization, you do a good job of using the system for what it's intended for. Thanks very much for being our guest today, Charles. I'm going to pop those top tips up along with the recording of the video as per normal. And yeah, great to have you. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much, Kathy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.